dapat po munang alamin or matukoy ang pangunahing problema ng bansa upang mapagtuunan ng pansin at mabigyan ng solusyon.
We should have specific goals, do research, and make a policy that is fair for everyone.
Walang problema sa pulisiya. Iayos lang ang pagpapatupad.
Bago patubas ang batas, pag-aralan muna gusto ng government.
Two things, clarity and execution. Both, you need the communication and monitoring. As simple as that.
Mandato ng Philippine Institute for Development Studies o PIDS na gumawa ng mga pag-aaral at pananaliksik ng mga pulisiya at programa ng pamahalaan at magbigay ng rekomendasyon sa mga mambabatas sa pagbabalangkas ng mga pulisiyang makakatulong sa ating bansa. Sinusulong ng aming ahensya ang evidence-based policy making upang bigyan din ng kahalagahan ng pulisiya na batay sa datos at policy research na sumusuri sa tunay na kalagayan ng ating mga komunidad. Napakahalaga ng policy research, lalo na sa mga panahong dumadaan sa krisis ang ating bansa.
Kapag pulisiya ay pinag-aralan, susulong ang bayan.
In need of references for your research? Do you want a digital library that you can access for free anytime and anywhere? You don't have to look far. SERPI is here for you. SERPI is an online database of socioeconomic materials produced by the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, government agencies, research and academic institutions, and international organizations based in the Philippines. It is the country's first online repository of socioeconomic information, created for policymakers and development practitioners, researchers, educators, and students. To access SERPI, just visit the PIDS website and click the SERPI widget under the Databases tab, or type serp-p.pids.gov.ph. SERPI has a wide variety of materials such as journal articles, books, research papers, working papers, policy notes, audiovisual materials, and more. As of 2022, SERPI has more than 60 partner institutions contributing knowledge resources to the database. SERPI provides a comprehensive coverage of references encompassing 22 research themes: labor and education, gender and development, poverty, technology and innovation, trade and industry, and many more. On the enhanced website of SERPI, you can filter your research by keyword or author, publication type, research theme, or year published, all at the same time. SERPI has more than 7,000 publications and audiovisual materials that you can access and download for free. What are you waiting for? Visit SERPI now. Socioeconomic Research Portal for the Philippines, innovating knowledge exchange and policy research.
So what is PIDS? For over 40 years, the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, or PIDS, has been the country's foremost socioeconomic think tank. It conducts rigorous and objective policy research and analyses that help the government in crafting relevant policies, plans, and programs in support of the country's long-term vision and development goals. PIDS pursues its mandate through three basic programs: research, dissemination, and outreach. Through its research program, PIDS identifies and prioritizes studies, develops proposals, and conducts research on priority areas. The results of these studies are then disseminated through different platforms, publications, online resources, PIDS Corner, seminars, and the Development Policy Research Month, or DPRM, held every September. To shed light on key policy issues, the advice and expertise of the Institute's research fellows are also sought by policymakers, government agencies, private sector, and civil society. Since 1977, PIDS has completed numerous policy studies on a wide range of development topics. This brand of service has then translated to policies and programs that have improved the lives of every Filipino. Philippine Institute for Development Studies, service through policy research.
Dapat po munang alamin or matukoy ang pangunahing problema ng bansa upang mapagtuunan ng pansin at mabigyan ng solusyon.
We should have specific goals, do research, and make a policy that is fair for everyone.
Walang problema sa pulisiya. Iayos lang ang pagpapatupad.
Bago patubas ang batas, pag-aralan muna gusto ng government.
Two things, clarity and execution. Both, you need the communication and monitoring. As simple as that.
Mandato ng Philippine Institute for Development Studies o PIDS na gumawa ng mga pag-aaral at pananaliksik ng mga polisiya at programa ng pamahalaan at magbigay ng rekomendasyon sa mga mambabatas sa pagbabalangkas ng mga polisiyang makakatulong sa ating bansa. Sinusulong ng aming ahensya ang evidence-based policy making upang bigyan diin ng kahalagahan ng polisiya na batay sa datos at policy research na sumusuri sa tunay na kalagayan ng ating mga komunidad. Napakahalaga ng policy research, lalo na sa mga panahong dumadaan sa krisis ang ating bansa.
Kapag pulisiya ay pinag-aralan, susulong ang bayan.
In need of references for your research? Do you want a digital library that you can access for free anytime and anywhere? You don't have to look far. SERPI is here for you. SERPI is an online database of socioeconomic materials produced by the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, government agencies, research and academic institutions, and international organizations based in the Philippines. It is the country's first online repository of socioeconomic information, created for policymakers and development practitioners, researchers, educators, and students. To access SERPI, just visit the PIDS website and click the SERPI widget under the Databases tab, or type serp-p.pids.gov.ph. SERPI has a wide variety of materials such as journal articles, books, research papers, working papers, policy notes, audiovisual materials, and more. As of 2022, SERPI has more than 60 partner institutions contributing knowledge resources to the database. SERPI provides a comprehensive coverage of references encompassing 22 research themes: labor and education, gender and development, poverty, technology and innovation, trade and industry, and many more. On the enhanced website of SERPI, you can filter your research by keyword or author, publication type, research theme, or year published, all at the same time. SERPI has more than 7,000 publications and audiovisual materials that you can access and download for free. What are you waiting for? Visit SERPI now. Socioeconomic research portal for the Philippines, innovating knowledge exchange and policy research.
So what is PIDS? For over 40 years, the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, or PIDS, has been the country's foremost socioeconomic think tank. It conducts rigorous and objective policy research and analyses that help the government in crafting relevant policies, plans, and programs in support of the country's long-term vision and development goals. PIDS pursues its mandate through three basic programs: research, dissemination, and outreach. Through its research program, PIDS identifies and prioritizes studies, develops proposals, and conducts research on priority areas. The results of these studies are then disseminated through different platforms, publications, online resources, PIDS Corner, seminars, and the Development Policy Research Month, or DPRM, held every September. To shed light on key policy issues, the advice and expertise of the Institute's research fellows are also sought by policymakers, government agencies, private sector, and civil society. Since 1977, PIDS has completed numerous policy studies on a wide range of development topics. This brand of service has then translated to policies and programs that have improved the lives of every Filipino. Philippine Institute for Development Studies, service through policy research.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the PIDS webinar series, where we feature our policy studies and the insights of policymakers, experts, and scholars. Through this platform, we hope to provide an accessible venue for evidence-based discussion of current and emerging development issues. I'm Sheila Siar, and I will be your moderator. As we emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic, the air transport industry plays a significant role in accelerating economic recovery with the massive resumption of travel and tourism. An effective and efficient air transport infrastructure is thus critical for the industry and its chain of interconnected businesses to recover and flourish. Friends, this afternoon, we will take a look at the state and current issues ailing our air transport sector and discuss solutions from the perspective of the government, the academe, and the private sector. To formally start our conversation, let us listen to the welcome message of Dr. Aniceto Orbeta Jr., the president of PIDS.
Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar on Philippine air transport infrastructure, state issues, and ways forward. First, allow me to acknowledge the presence of the following officials. Department of Transportation Undersecretary for Aviation and Airports, Roberto Lim. Department of Transportation Assistant Secretary for Aviation and Airports, Enrico Antonio Esquivel. Embassy of the Republic of Korea in the Philippines, First Secretary Lee Yong-sin. Embassy of the Republic of Korea in the Philippines, Third Secretary Kim Do-sik. United Nations Industrial Development Organization Country Representative Teddy Monroy. House of Representatives Director Dominador Gamboa. Lorma Community Development Foundation Executive Director Andrew Cesar Rimando. Mindanao Coalition of Development NGO Networks Executive Director Raisa May Anayatin. University of the Philippines Planning and Development Research Foundation Executive Director Tabasam Rasa. I would also like to greet the following representatives from the government, academia, private sector, civil service, media, virtually present today, and those watching through the PIDS and SERP Facebook pages. Today we will look at the status of our air transport industry. This is a vital lifeline to business, trade, and tourism, especially in the age of globalization. Air transport enables the smooth movement of goods, investments, and people, facilitating economic and social flows that are fundamental drivers of overall growth and development. The International Air Transport Association reported that the air transport industry, including the airlines and its supply chain and spending by foreign tourists, is estimated to provide $10.4 billion of gross domestic product in the Philippines. In addition, it supports 1.2 million jobs, including occupations directly created by airlines, airport operators and enterprises, aircraft manufacturers, air navigation service providers, jobs generated by local suppliers that support the air transport industry, and jobs created by the tourism sector. The congestion at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport, or Rhea, is a central issue hampering the growth and efficiency of the local air transport industry. Stakeholders have repeatedly called out its inadequate facilities, poor infrastructure support in the provincial airports, constrained airline operations, passenger inconveniences, and safety concerns. To address these, the government has implemented several measures to address the congestion issue in Ninoy by constructing a new terminal building and runway at the Clark International Airport and developing other airports like the New Manila International Airport in Bulacan. Today's presentation will help us evaluate the air transport infrastructure and ways to address the current challenges and rising demand for air transport. We will also hear the insights of experts from the government, academia, and the private sector. Civil Aeronautics Board Administrative Officer Atty. Rhea Morales-Gonzalez will share the government's plan and initiative to resolve the air transport infrastructure issues. Fellow discussant, University of the Philippines National College of Public Administration and Governance, or UPNCPAG, Associate Professor Dr. Enrico Basilio, and Cebgo President and Chief Executive Officer Mr. Jose Alejandro Reyes will also offer their responses and perspectives. We are grateful to have you at this webinar. To our attendees, please stay until the end of the webinar, and I encourage you to actively participate in the open forum and contribute your insights and suggestions that can help improve our air transport sector. Thank you. I now give up the floor to the moderator.
Thank you very much for the opening message of Dr. Aniceto Orbeta Jr. Okay, so before I introduce our presenters, just some quick reminders on how to join the discussion. So you may post your questions and comments using the Q&A button. So please indicate your name and organization if you want to be identified when I read the questions. To all speakers,
You may respond by typing your answers, which will be visible to all the attendees. Alternatively, you can choose to answer the question live during the open forum. And for our live stream viewers on Facebook, we encourage you to participate in the discussion as well. Please type your questions or your comments on the comment section of Facebook, and we will accommodate as many questions as possible during the open forum. Okay, so let us begin our conversation by listening to our featured presentation this afternoon, which, as mentioned by Dr. Orbeta, is the study, the PIDS discussion paper of Philippine Air Transport Infrastructure, State Issues, Government Strategies, authored by Dr. Kris Francisco and Ms. Valerie Lim. And you can download a copy of the study from the PIDS website. Both Kris and Valerie are presenting this afternoon. Okay, so Dr. Kris Francisco is a research fellow at PIDS. Before joining PIDS, she was an associate professor at the La Salle University School of Economics. She was also a consultant at the Department of Trade and Industry in the Philippines and an associate at the Asian Development Bank Institute in Tokyo, Japan. Her areas of specialization are in development economics, applied econometric analysis, and transportation economics. Dr. Francisco has a PhD degree in public economics from the National Graduate Research Institute for Policy Studies in Tokyo, Japan. Meanwhile, Valerie Lim is a research analyst at PIDS. She has a bachelor's degree in applied economics from the De La Salle University, Manila, and she has conducted studies on infrastructure and transportation. Kris and Valerie, you now have the virtual floor.
Thank you, Dr. Sheila. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here and lending us your time. As mentioned by Dr. Sheila and Dr. Orbeta, we will be talking about our own air transport sector this afternoon. We will look at the state. Next slide, please. Okay, so before we look at our own air transport sector, let us first have an appreciation of how the air transport sector or the aviation sector, what role does it play in the global economy? Next slide, please. Now, the air transport sector, as also mentioned by our beloved PIDS president, it enables the conduct of global trade. It's important because it allows many businesses to have access to international markets. The air transport sector gives a more efficient way of transporting products and services all over the world. So in 2019, the Oxford Economics records around 6.5 trillion of goods that was transported via air, which is equivalent to 1% of international trade. Usually the high value and highly perishable products are being traded via air. The air transport sector also supports the conduct of international tourism. The UNWTO records that 58% of international tourists traveled by air in 2019. Of course, because of the efficiency provided by the air transport sector, it encourages productivity in many other sectors of the economy, such as manufacturing, telecom, and all other sectors, and this enhances the business operation, which ultimately leads to more jobs and employment. Next slide, please. Now, the latest data shows us that the contribution of the aviation sector or the air transport sector to global GDP is about $3.5 trillion. Of Indonesia or the Netherlands. The air transportation sector also provided 8.7 million jobs worldwide. This does not only include the direct employment provided by the sector, but also its catalytic effects to other sectors, employment related to the supply chain or employment related to the tourism sector. Aviation jobs are also seen to be 4.3 times more productive than any job in all other sectors, one aviation job is actually equivalent to $117,000 contribution in global GDP. Now, in 2019, a total of 48,000 routes were served, and 4.5 billion passengers were transferred via air, according to Oxford Economics. Next slide, please. So having said that, let's look at its role. So what role does it play in the Philippine economy? Next slide, please. Well, if we look at the direct contribution of the air transport sector to our GDP, it will appear small. The air transport sector is actually part of the transport and storage industry, which contributes less than 4% to our GDP. And the air transport sector alone, the contribution might seem minute at less than 1%. So next slide, please. But its contribution does not only rely on its direct contribution, but it also have other impact to other sectors of our economy. According to several studies, it is a leading facilitator of economic activities. The study of Yu et al. Looked at the impact of the air transport sector on manufacturing, trade, and trade sectors. It also noted its contribution to agriculture, fishery, forestry, mining and quarrying, electricity, gas, water sector, and tourism. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Another study also noted that high-value industries are usually the main purchasers of air transport services. The study of Llanto and Rodolfo highlighted that about 21% of industry spending in the wholesale and retail trade is allotted to air transport services. Another study also looked at the telecom industries, wherein 8.3% of the total industry spending is similarly on air transport services. Next slide, please. Perhaps the most valuable contribution to the Philippine economy is its role in facilitating the international tourism. Now, the tourism has a direct GVA contribution to of 13%. It also provides employment to many of the population of our population, so 14% contribution to total employment. And the Department of Tourism notes that 98% of our tourists in 2019 arrived by air. Next slide, please. So this is the latest data from the Aviation Benefits and Beyond Borders publication. So in 2018, the total contribution to the Philippine economy of the air transport sector is $10.4 billion. This is equivalent to 3.4% of our GDP. The total jobs supported by the air transport sector is around 1.2 million, which includes direct employment, indirect employment related to the supply chain, but also foreign direct investments and exports. Our top international tourists are from the Republic of Korea, People's Republic of China, United States, Japan, and Australia. Our top 5 busiest air cargo routes are Hong Kong, Republic of Korea, UAE, Chinese Taipei, and Japan. Next slide, please. Okay, so having said this, what can we expect in the aviation sector in the coming years? Next slide, please. So definitely there will be a growth in passenger traffic in the next years. The Oxford team forecasts around 8.2 billion passengers by 2038, and this is expected to support around 143 million jobs and $6.3 trillion in economic activities. Next slide, please. So where will that growth come from? Mainly, the travel will occur between China and Africa and also within Asia. Although you will also notice that in a lot of these regional groups, regions, growth in travel will occur. Next slide, please. In terms of regional growth, projected annual growth rate for international passenger traffic is expected to grow very fast in the Asia-Pacific region and in developing countries. Both groups include the Philippines. Next slide, please. Now, country-specific projection shows that by 2027, the Philippines will be expecting around 88.3 million passengers. And in comparison, this is like more than 50% growth in passengers as compared to the 2019 value. For Hong Kong, for Chinese Taipei, and even for Singapore. Next slide, please. Now, this projection is actually not really new. JICA has been telling us since 2012, when they released their study, that the Philippines must expect the influx of in the coming years. If you look at the graph in 2019, JICA's projection is actually close to 50 million. And in actual data, actually mas malapit tayo sa 50 million. I think we already surpassed this projection given to us by JICA in 2012. Next slide, please. So maybe you're thinking now that, of course, we experienced the COVID-19 pandemic the past few years, and somehow that might have changed the trajectory for the air transport sector. So how did that change the situation? Next slide, please. Well, of course, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of us weren't allowed to travel. We have some mobility restrictions. A lot of government closed the borders. And of course, this resulted to decrease in passenger revenues and change in cargo revenues for a lot of airlines. But this reduction in revenues is actually slowly changing in 2021. And they are expecting that things will change in 2022 and will go back to normal by 2023 or 2024. Next slide, please. So profit in the air transport industry is slowly recovering. Next slide, please. But it will not be the same for all regions. In the publication of the IATA, because a lot of the governments in the Asia-Pacific region are risk-averse. So traveling to different countries is not that popular yet. It's not that easy to travel in the Asia-Pacific region during this time. But definitely, next slide, please. The IATA expects that by the end of 2023, most regions will be at or exceeding pre-pandemic levels of demand. So what's the main message? The COVID-19 just slowed things down, but the expectation that demand will increase in the next few years, it remains. It's just on pause right now. Next slide, please. Okay, so against this backdrop, what is the current state of our air transport sector, of our air transportation infrastructure? Okay, so currently we have 90 national airports. We have 8 international airports, 21 principal class 1, or these airports are those that could accommodate aircraft that have at least 100 passengers. Principal class 2 airports, we have 20. These are a bit smaller airports, which caters to aircrafts with below 100 passengers, but more than 19. And then we have 38 community airports. These are airports used for general aviation aircraft. Note from this figure that commercial airports, or those airports catering to commercial flights, are only ito lang international airports, principal class 1 and principal class 2. So technically, we have 49 airports that are catering to commercial. Okay, so table 1 just shows us some specifics about the airports that we have. We can skip this one. Next slide, please. Okay, so based on the number of passengers, we have already experienced this expected increase in passenger demand. In between 2010 to 2019, we have seen an increase in the passenger traffic, especially in our main gateway, the Ninoy Aquino International Airport. As I've said earlier, we're nearing 50 million mark for the iya. This is followed by the Cebu Mactan Airport and the Davao Airport and the Clark Diosdado Macapagal International Airport. Next slide, please. So international visitor arrival by air also increased over the years. In 2019, we experienced around 8.9 million passengers. Next slide, please. And by port of entry, we can see that NAIA remains as the most popular gateway for our tourists. Its share in the total arrivals is 61%, followed by Cebu International Airport, and then followed by the Kalibo International Airport. Next slide, please. Now, the top 10 visitors are from Korea, China, USA, and Japan, and Australia. These are the top 5 countries where our international visitors are from. So napapalit-palit lang sila for the top 3 spots, but these are our usual visitors. Next slide, please. We also observe a general increase in cargo traffic over the years from between 2010 and 2019. Next slide, please. Okay, so sorry. So what can we do to prepare for the looming increase in demand for air travel? Can you go back? Okay. Basically, we need to address prevailing issues and challenges in our sector. So what we did here is we reviewed the previous study that were already done on the air transport sector, and we summarized the issues that were discussed in those studies. We grouped the issues into 4. Issues related to capacity, issues related to technical capability, number 3, issues related to quality, and lastly, issues related to institutional environment. Next slide, please. Okay, we go first to the issue regarding capacity. We have 2 problems when we talk about issues with our airports on capacity. So we are experiencing aircraft congestion, and the second one is passenger congestion. So for aircraft congestion, demand for our airport facilities is way more than its current capacity. What aggravates the problem is that the configuration of NAIA's runway and taxiway limits the type of aircraft that can be accommodated. NAIA's runways are actually intersecting, which leads to congestion of aircraft. Flights must be planned to maximize arrivals, and arrivals are prioritized over departure. There is also a lack of rapid exit taxiways, which affects our runway occupancy time, according to a study of Rodolfo in 2017. Next slide, please. Okay, so competing for slots in NAIA. And usually these general aviation planes occupies the runway much longer because they have smaller engines based on the same study. Next slide, please. In 2011, JICA already noted that most of our flights in NAIA is scheduled during the daytime, so between 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. And this causes problems because a lot are competing for the slots. In response to this, the government limited the number of arriving and departing flights to 40 per hour. Next slide, please. So NAIA, as we've seen in the previous slide that I've shown, NAIA serves as our main gateway for passengers. And because of that, a lot of passengers are actually going through the IA, wherein the maximum allowable capacity is only 35 million. In 2016, we reached that maximum capacity, wherein we accommodated a total of 39.6 million passengers, according to the study of Yu et al. In 2019. Next slide, please. So the congestion in the runway is actually a result of another issue, our issue on the technical capability of our airports. So domestic flights, the reason why our domestic flights are mostly scheduled during the day is because of the lack of night rating and instrument landing facilities of most provincial airports. As of 2020, there are only 22 night-rated airports. Based on the DOTR website. Next slide, please. In 2016, IATA released a report which noted that the utilization of our runways is not really optimized due to air traffic management issues. We have issues on vectors and delay, lack of radar, non-standard air traffic control procedure, poor en route communication, safety concerns for ground operations. Next slide, please. Indicators of quality also tells us that there is a need to improve the quality of our air transport infrastructure. So in terms of aviation infrastructure, our infrastructure pales in comparison with other neighbor countries. So I will explain the score later, but note that we received a score of 3.2. In this aviation score, the higher the score, the better. In terms of connectivity, we fare better than other countries. Airport accessibility is also okay because our main airport is located within the city. Next slide, please. So aviation infrastructure score is actually a score from 1 to 7 developed by the World Economic Forum. It's based on the quality of the aviation infrastructure using indicators such as available seat kilometers, the number of departures, airport density, and the number of operating airlines, as well as the quality of air transport infrastructure for domestic and international flights. As I've said, the higher the score, the better. Can we go back to the table, please? So we receive a score of 3.2. If you will notice, the Philippines received the lowest score in comparison to all other countries that are included in the table. And look at the number in terms of airports. We have the Oxford Economics recorded a total of 46 airports. So originally, I was thinking since we are an archipelagic country, I thought we had many airports compared to our neighbor countries, but actually, I don't think that's true. Japan has many airports compared to us. And Indonesia has 129 airports. We only have 46. Indonesia is similarly an archipelagic country. Okay, so next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, there are also other indicators developed by the World Economic Forum and the Aviation Benefits Beyond Borders gives us excuse me, I can't read. So in terms of Air Trade Facilitation Index, this captures how a country facilitates cargo through its customs and borders processes and regulations. So this indicators gives us an idea of our air transport services. So we scored 7.6, where in the reference score, the highest score should be 10. We ranked 54 out of 124 countries. In terms of E-Pride Friendliness Index, this assesses the performance of 136 countries, which considers the actual penetration of electronic transactions and documents in the air cargo shipments. We scored very low at 0.3. 61 out of 135 countries. In terms of Enabling Trade Index, this assesses the performance of 136 economies on domestic and international access by looking at the border administration, transport and digital infrastructure, transport services, and operating environment. We scored 4.1, wherein the reference score is 7. In terms of ranking, we ranked 82nd out of 136 countries. So we not only need to improve our transport infrastructure, but we also need to improve our air transport services. Next slide, please. Okay, so the last issue is on institutional environment. Now, several studies have been raising concerns on the coherence and convergence among government agencies responsible for airport development and their implementation. And also, it has been cited that there is a need to separate the regulatory and developmental function of agencies involved in the air transport sector. This is actually an issue that is not just constraining the air transportation sector alone, but this is a general issue for the whole transport sector in the Philippines. Next slide, please. Now, in 2009, the World Bank study already highlighted that there's a need for an integrated system for planning, budgeting, building, and operating transport infrastructure in the Philippines. In 2009, the ADB also released their own study, which likewise noted that movement in our country usually requires the utilization of one or more mode of transportation. However, coordination among agencies responsible for transport infrastructure is generally very limited. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm turning off my video because I was told that my connection is not really good. Okay, so next slide, please. The unfortunate fact is that the lack of coordination not only happens between government agencies, but also within the department themselves. There have been examples that were given wherein an airport opened, but there was inadequate road access to and from airport, so the airport wasn't really usable for the population. There was also an airport that opened in 2013, but it did not have proper navigational aids, which was later installed a year after. So these are the types of issues that are happening on the ground. Next slide, please. Okay, funding for the operation and maintenance of transport infrastructure is also usually not included in the budget. What is included is just the building of the air transport infrastructure or the airport, but the maintenance of that airport is not included, which is sad. Next slide, please. Independent airport authorities also find it difficult to improve or procure airport facilities and equipment, even if they have the budget because of the lack of delineation in terms of mandate, or sometimes it's confusing because government agencies have overlapping mandates. Next slide, please. This is the conflicting responsibilities of government agencies in the air transport sector is also a problem, and it is a problem for a lot of the sectors of the transportation sector in general. This is the parang
I think we lost Dr. Francisco. Valerie, would you like to take over until we until she comes back?
All right po. Hello?
Yes.
Hello, good afternoon po. Actually, this is the last slide for the prevailing issue and challenges. Dr. Kris was actually trying to mention that there were conflicting responsibilities as regulator and operator for CAAP, and there is actually this is because they were overlapping functions related to planning, budgeting, and programming of airport policies. Next slide po. So, continuing the presentation, what has been done to address the prevailing issues and challenges mentioned in the previous slides? We now move on to the government plans, programs, and strategies. The last two administrations actually prioritized infrastructure, and the good thing to note is that the GTB allocation for infrastructure spending had already increased from 5% to 6%. Next, please. However, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Build program rearranged for the IFPs to prioritize projects that would bring the most developmental impact with the reallocation of funding. And now, with the economy's gradual direction towards recovery, the BBB program continues to expand and is now able to realign its implementation and project delivery. Next, please. With the release of the PDP 2023 to 2028, the government was able to recognize the challenges in the aviation industry, such as connectivity barriers caused by air traffic congestion and the inadequate financial capability for capacity building to accommodate the projected increase in demand. So the government is aware of these challenges and that they are likely to persist. Next po. For the strategies, some of the strategies that were laid out in the PDP include, firstly, the rehabilitation and maintenance of existing airports, which will be continued and complemented by the development of access roads to address issues with congestion. And as for developing new airports, there is a highlight for needing to build new airports outside of urban areas. And this spatial planning is forward-looking because it takes into consideration acquiring adequate space for future expansion projects. Next po. Of course, the government will continue to pursue night rating of regional airports. And as of the latest annual report of DOTR, there are 21 night-rated airports, which was already completed, and 8 new airports were under project development in the BBB page last June 2022. And lastly, one way to support or boost tourism is by providing direct access to tourist sites. This is possible following a hub and spoke model wherein gateway airports will be connected to feeder airports. Next po. So these are the targets outlined in the PDP, which is to further increase the number of both passenger and cargo transport via air. Next po. And here we have the annual summary of IFPs with 14 air transport infrastructure projects out of the 194 total. Next. And this is just a more detailed version of the 14 projects where we see that there are 5 new airports being developed, 2 of them are already approved for implementation, while the rest of the projects that are listed are under improvement of operations and facilities. There is actually one project that will be focusing on the improvement of air traffic management and air navigation, which will be concessionaire through a private sector. Ayan. And lastly, we have the government infrastructure policies on air transport. Most of these policies are still Senate bills or are still undergoing approval. And while we have here the creation of the Philippine Airports Authority and the amending of RA 9497, which were just carried over from the last Congress, and the Open Skies policy being the last recent legislative action documented. Okay, next pa. So, what can we do to improve further? Okay, one of our recommendations is to maintain the commitment to allot the 5 to 6% of GDP to infrastructure spending, continue government's awareness about the issues and challenges faced by the air transport sector, and then use more appropriate indicators to guide policymakers in their goal to improve the performance of the sector. Lastly, fast track government process and make it more attractive for private sector to partner with government in providing for the infrastructure needs of the country. Overall, the government is on the right path in improving our air transport infrastructure, and it recognizes the needs of the sector. However, time is a crucial element that must be considered with the rising air travel demand and the projected growth globally. So, the COVID-19 pandemic actually bought us some time to realign these targets, to realign our project plans for these new targets. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kris and Valerie, for your comprehensive presentation. Well, the prevailing issues and challenges in our aviation sector that you presented are actually not new to us. We have seen them or have also experienced them directly. Well, still fresh in our minds is the airport disaster in early January 2023 that affected many passengers. But our aim today is to discuss solutions and ways forward, and we're hopeful that the guidance provided by the Philippine Development Plan 2023 to 2028 will help us address the current issues, and we can unpack those solutions during the open forum. Okay, so before I give the floor to our discussants, let us first have a quick poll to get your views on what key areas should be prioritized or must be prioritized to improve the current state of our airport transport, of our air transport sector. And on the screen is the question. It's our poll question. What should be the main focus in improving the Philippine air transport infrastructure? So to answer, just click the Mentimeter link available on the Zoom chat box, and also on the comment section of Facebook. So just open the chat box to find the Mentimeter link. I'm sure there are lots of things that you feel we need to prioritize, so you can give up to 3 answers, but please limit your answers to 1 or 2 words only. Okay, examples are, let's say, safety, technology, modernization, etc. Up to you. Okay, so can we now look at the results on Mentimeter as you answer the question? Mai, please, or Meili? Okay, so we hope that okay, can we now see the results? What do you think are the top answers? Okay, so we have there a number of items which include, okay, let me see, modernization, accessible facilities. I also see technology, address congestion, security, maintenance, investing, operations, but funding, I think is funding and modernization, I think are the top answers based on the size of size of the word, no? Leadership also figures in the results. Okay, so you have leadership, modernization, security, funding, and others. So leadership is really very important. I think we are all in agreement in terms of the importance of good leadership. Okay, so at this point, let's leave the poll results for now, and let us listen to the reactions and insights of our discussants. So we are honored to have with us 3 experts. Okay, and for our first discussant, let us all welcome Attorney Rhea Morales-Gonzalez, the Chief Administrative Officer of the Civil Aeronautics Board. She earned her law degree from the Aureliana University School of Law and studied AB Political Science, major in governance at De La Salle University. Attorney Gonzalez started her law practice as a counsel in Agan and Montenegro law offices. Thereafter, she went into government service as a procurement management officer of the DBM, Government Procurement Policy Board. Then she joined the Department of Transportation as CAB's hearing officer until she became its chief administrative officer. She's likewise engaged as a law professor in transportation law. Attorney Gonzalez, you now have the virtual floor.
Thank you and good afternoon, Ms. Sheila. Can you hear me well?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So good afternoon. Foremost, I'd like to thank the PIDS for this opportunity to give our insights on the current state of the air transport infrastructure in the Philippines, including the issues and challenges faced by the government. So I'd like to say hello to my colleagues and superiors in the government sector, as well as our colleagues in the aviation industry as well. So before I delve into our subject, let me first provide you a brief introduction on the main functions rendered by our office, the Civil Aeronautics Board, or the CAB, because a while ago we were hearing about the functions of the Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines. So this may be relevant to the pertinent points of our discourse. So allow me to just give you a brief idea behind it. In general, the CAB is a government regulatory body in charge of the economic aspect of air transportation. One of the primary roles of CAB is to develop and implement policies that enhance air connectivity in the Philippines. And to achieve this, the CAB works closely with other government agencies, airlines, and industry stakeholders to develop initiatives aimed at expanding air services, improving airport infrastructure, streamlining regulatory processes, and in general, promoting the growth of the aviation industry. The CAB is under the Department of Transportation. It is an attached agency. Now, going to the discussion, the presentation that was remarkably presented by Dr. Francisco and Ms. Lim, they began by highlighting the importance of air transport infrastructure in economic growth, as its connectivity for businesses and individuals. It facilitates trade and tourism and allows for access to global markets. Concomitantly, when the IATA, or the International Air Transport Association, previously made a study about the importance of air transport in the Philippines, it confirmed that if air transport's unique contribution is that it bridges cities, then the flow of goods, people, investment, and ideas that stimulate economic development must flow unimpeded to maximize their contribution to consumers and the wider economy. Here we measure how freely goods and people flow across borders. Therefore, unavailability of destinations for travelers is actually a major concern. In the words of IATA, the most important economic benefit of air transport is the value of that passengers and shippers derive from the ability to access destinations and markets around the world. Question is this idea of seamless access or connectivity a far cry in the Philippine airport setting or air transport setting? Well, I guess this is the reason why we are all here today. Correlating this with our discussion, the presentation showed statistics and data on the state of air transport infrastructure in the Philippines, revealing that the country has one of the highest airfare rates in the region, while its airports are characterized by congestion, limited capacity, poor facilities. The study further attributes these issues to inadequate government investment in infrastructure and transportation services, lack of coordination among government agencies, and poor airport management. As I mentioned a while ago, the CAB is in charge of the economic aspect of air transport. So it may be best to focus on issues relevant to our jurisdiction or expertise. Now let us try to address some issues on capacity and connectivity. We refer to the thrust of the government to fully liberalize our secondary airports in order for these airports to serve as gateways to other parts of the world. And this is actually espoused under Executive Orders 29 and 219, or what we commonly call the liberalization policies. For some, they call it open skies policies. Now, adhering to these liberalization policies, the CAB regularly reviews and revisits air agreements with other countries through bilaterals. We call them air service agreements to enhance air connectivity. This encourages more airlines to operate in the Philippines, leading to increased competition and a greater number of flight choices for travelers. In addition, in the issuance of permits to air service operators, which is within our jurisdiction as a regulatory body, before we grant certificates of public convenience or foreign air carriers permits, the CAB assesses various factors such as the financial and operational capabilities of the operator, as well as the safety measures in place to ensure adherence to international aviation standards. This is to maintain and continuously improve the quality and safety of air transportation services in the country. The CAB is also responsible for enforcing regulatory compliance, including consumer protection regulations. Our agency seeks to ensure that airlines are transparent in our operations, or rather in their operations, concerning fees and charges, providing convenient options for travelers, and being responsive to consumer complaints. And if you do not know it yet, these are all encapsulated under what we call the Air Passengers Bill of Rights, or APBR. This is an economic regulation issued by the CAB and Department of Transportation and DTI Joint Administrative Circular in 2012. Now, these points that I have all conveyed, these are some of the main efforts addressing the relevant circumstances that surround the development of air transport infrastructure and connectivity. Let's try to move further. The article discusses potential government strategies and policies, including expansion and rehabilitation of existing airports, development of new airports, implementation of air traffic management systems, and the promotion of public-private partnerships. Thereafter, we heard that the study also highlighted the need for government to improve regulations and standards for air transport infra, tackle corruption, increase public awareness of the benefits of air transport infra. At this point, it may be relevant to cite some data that we have on scheduled international operations, at least for the Philippines. This data is actually based on calendar year 2022, as submitted by the airlines to our office. So from the data, we gathered that there is a continued growth from 2013, 7 years in terms of revenue passenger traffic, with an average growth of 9.02%. However, there was a significant decline, nearly 80% during 2020, particularly at the start of the second quarter due to the declaration of the global health pandemic. Now, fast forward to 2022, the Philippines started to see the ease of travel restrictions and relaxed certain health requirements. So these relaxations led to opening of borders. Then immediately we felt that passenger traffic improved. In fact, it's by 348%. Taking into consideration the assessment of IATA also, IATA said that international travel numbers would reach 82% of the pre-pandemic levels this year, 92% in 2024, and 101% in 2025. With the numbers rapidly rising, the NAIA congestion, as mentioned in the presentation, poses an alarming threat to our industry. So you ask, what then is the government's response? Primarily, we will recall that several airports, and I think this was likewise mentioned by Ms. Lim a while ago, they have been constructed, reconditioned, and or modernized rather. This will strengthen our thrust of liberalizing gateways for increasing connectivity. Among these improvements, let us try to turn our focus for a moment on the nearest airport to NAIA, which is the Clark International Airport. Actually, this is currently being eyed on to serve as NAIA's complementary gateway. So just to give you an idea, the Clark International Airport opened its new passenger terminal building. It has modern state-of-the-art facilities, and it has a design capacity of at least 8 million passengers annually. But due to the current situation, its fit out is just 4 million. Considering this, we also have to consider common roadblocks impeding connectivity, okay? Particularly limited flight options, okay? It is even made fewer by the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, from a passenger's perspective, air connectivity represents the ability to seamlessly travel by air from origin to destination in the shortest time possible. Lesser flight destinations equals lesser connectivity. Seamless travel is a key element. Next, the connectivity issue is not just about flights or air connectivity. It also involves rail, land connectivity. We have to have accessible linkages. So how do we move forward in addressing the roadblocks identified? Among the suggestions include a wider and concentrated tourism campaign to encourage more investments in the area. As aptly mentioned in the presentation, airports will be established in tourism clusters identified by the Department of Tourism in support of local tourism development. A hub and spoke model will be followed in air development in regional areas and island provinces with natural and cultural tourism sites. Let us remember at this point, location, distance, geography, they play a key role, or they play key roles in helping people decide where they are going to travel. Let us also remember, lack of investors equals lack of tourists and vice versa. Okay, so another method for improvement, we can also see a traffic revision strategy whereby the government can revisit the policy on airlines to operate in a particular airport. This has already been done in the past and may be reconsidered. Lastly, it may be helpful to study the cases of complementary airports in other countries. Examples, we have London, which has Heathrow and Gatwick. Japan, they have Narita and Haneda. And South Korea's Incheon Airport in Gimpo Airport, among others. Okay, I have last 5 minutes, I was told. Sige. Finally, for my last point of discussion, the presentation mentioned about the latest government policies aimed at improving institutional environment in the air transport sector. Particularly, the report made mention about bills seeking to streamline some conflicting roles or overlapping powers, okay, in the government agencies. For the aviation sector, apart from the list that was provided, I remember there were in fact previous bills proposing to migrate what others may have perceived as overlapping functions. So in the hopes of shedding light to this, please allow me to make some distinctions. In the Philippines, the one responsible for technical regulation is the CAAP, whereas the one responsible for economic regulation is the Civil Aeronautics Board, or CAB. The functions of CAAP, we already know it. This is one of navigation, technical safety concerns. It is specific and requires skills and expertise in air navigation and aircraft safety. Aside from this, CAAP also regulates and supervises airports as well as flying schools, general aviation aircraft, and even helicopters. Whereas, aside from air carriers, the CAB also caters to route development, international cooperation and reciprocity, and air passenger convenience, among its other vital functions. Now, an interplay of this much functions may cause the degeneration of performance of different services that the CAAB and CAB separately and independently perform. When we consolidate or rather, yes, consolidate all aviation functions into one entity, we might sacrifice the true essence of what transportation represents, a method of reaching a desired outcome, a desired destination, a means to an end, whether it be for leisure or business reasons or for the transportation of goods. The purpose of transportation is to achieve that desired outcome. So we are not only considering safety, rather the quality and quantity of aviation services are crucial in accomplishing that intended goal. If tourism and business travel are to continue to grow, we must have that capacity to not only safely transport passengers to their destination, but we have to do so efficiently, affordably, and in a timely manner. So it is apparent that a separate entity entirely dedicated to achieve these goals may be the most desirable scenario. So this is a perspective we have to consider when we aim to streamline some governmental functions. So in conclusion, allow me to express my concurrence in that it is important to recognize that time is of the essence, and investments in air transport infra are urgently needed to cater to the projected increase in demand for air travel. But considering the urgency, and while we are all working towards concrete actions and to allocate appropriate resources, we can, in the meantime, make use of what is within reach by strengthening the utilization of other complementary airports outside of Manila, as I have discussed, in the hopes that one day these measures should all be part of an integrated and efficient air transport infrasystem. So, on behalf of the Civil Aeronautics Board, we appreciate the time given to us to contribute on efforts towards enhancing air connectivity and fostering growth in the country's aviation industry. All our conscious efforts to create a positive impact in the aviation industry will undoubtedly continue to be felt for years to come. So this is the end of my discussion. Maraming salamat po for the opportunity. Thank you.
Maraming salamat din po, Attorney RJ Gonzalez of the Civil Aeronautics Board. We'll hear more from her during the open forum. So if you have any questions for Attorney Gonzalez, if you seek some clarification regarding her comments, then please type your comments or questions on the Q&A section of Zoom. Okay, so at this point, let's hear the perspective of a specialist from the academy. We have with us today an esteemed expert in transport and logistics governance. Let's all welcome Dr. Enrico Basilio, Associate Professor and Executive Director of the Center for Policy and Executive Development of the University of the Philippines National College of Public Administration and Governance, or NCPAG. Dr. Basilio also serves as Director of the UP Public Administration Research and Extension Services Foundation, Incorporated. He's also the Chief of Party of the USAID Regulatory Reform Support Program for National Development, Chairperson of the EDC Transport and Logistics Committee, Senior Advisor to the Transport and Logistics Committees of the Philippine Chamber of Commerce Industry and Supply Chain Management Association of the Philippines, Associate Member of the National Research Council of the Philippines. He is also a member of the Transport Science Society of the Philippines and the Philippine Society of Public Administration. Dr. Basilio, sir, the floor is now yours.
Okay, thank you, Sheila. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you well.
Here, okay, thank you. And can you see my presentation? I prepared a short presentation so that I will not go over the 15-minute time limit. Okay, so thank you.
It's also visible, sir.
Yes, okay, so thank you. First, I'd like to thank PIDS for inviting me to be a discussant in this afternoon's webinar on air transport infrastructure, state and challenges and government action. Okay, so and I would like to commend the authors, Dr. Kris and Valerie, for a very good paper. Makes my work easy because it's good. I only have very few comments on the paper, and my intention is actually to raise some comments that would enhance the paper further. Okay. All right. I happen to read many of the references that you use in your paper, and I'm so familiar with many of them. And let me start my comment by citing the often cited work of Dr. Cherilyn Rodolfo. And here, what I want to highlight is that the fact that 70% of air cargoes, so I'm now talking about air cargo logistics, are carried in the bellies of commercial planes. So therefore, the point is the more we address the congestion in our airport infrastructure, the better it will be, not only for tourism, but also for the air cargo sector. Okay, that's the first point. Now, I was trying to find in the paper a discussion on the impact, the likely impact of the Bulacan International Airport in addressing the airport congestion issues, especially in NAIA. But I did not find much written. In fact, I only saw Bulacan International Airport mentioned in Table 8 as one of the infrastructure priority projects. So it might be interesting to discuss in the paper once it's finalized. What would be the impact of this Bulacan International Airport on, as a solution to the congestion issues in terms of airport capacity in the country, especially here in Luzon. Now, related to this is the question of what will now happen to Clark International Airport once Bulacan International Airport is up and about. So a few years from now, perhaps. So remember, we also invested about 15 billion just to expand the passenger terminal capacity of the airport. The runway is not a problem, unlike in NAIA. In fact, the runway of Clark is much better. But then again, with all these investments, question of what are we gonna do with the Clark International Airport once the Bulacan Airport is up and about. And then this has already been alluded to by Atty. Rhea. Are we now embracing the policy on dual or multi-airport systems? She mentioned Tokyo, Narita, Haneda, etc. Yeah, it's all there in the presentation of Dr. Rodolfo. And so the question of are we gonna have NAIA, Bulacan Airport, and even Clark? So okay, so I was hoping that the paper will be able to shed more light into this direction. Okay, now I agree with the night rating of many of our provincial airports to not only decongest NAIA, as already explained by the authors, but also to decongest Metro Manila, because in the study of JICA in 2011, that window of 7 to 4 p.m., 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Is basically rush hour for Metro Manila. So you can imagine all the people rushing to the airport and coming out of the airport. That basically adds to the road traffic in the metropolis. So, but then again, I remember when I was co-chair of the infrastructure networking group of the defunct National Competitiveness Council, the co-chair of NCC at the time, former Secretary of Trade, Cesar Bautista, has been advocating for a PPP scheme, wherein the airlines will be allowed to actually invest on the night rating equipment and navigational equipment, with the possibility of just deducting the investment as a way of recovering the investment from their landing fees. So that was one of the suggestions that was put forward by the late Secretary Cesar Bautista at the time, and this was in 2008, so more than a decade ago. The idea is to flatten the normal curve that you can see here by having early morning flights and even early evening flights, especially to and from provincial airports. Now, this was also discussed partly by Atty. Rhea, the aggressive stance, for example, on negotiating for air service agreements, or ASA. So, because if you try to negotiate for more SAS, that means you have more seats, and that means there will be greater pressure on your existing airport infrastructure. And we saw that already in 2013, from 200,000 seats, we aggressively negotiated for more air service agreements, and it increased to about 524,000, more than 524,000, and somewhere in the paper, you alluded to the fact that because of the congestion that it caused, the government response was to limit the flights to about 40 per hour. So, of course, the better solution there is to really expand the capacity, whether in Manila or outside of NAIA. You used the Oxford Economics data on the airport infrastructure score. Here I'm citing the World Economic Forum. It only shows that our airport infrastructure really also went down, and this was from 2018 to 2019. Okay, but then again, the question is, don't we have the funds to really invest on our airport facilities? And here, and trying to answer that question, I will partly answer the point that was raised by Mr. Paul Navarrete. He's there, one of the participants in the Q&A. CAAP, the Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines, is a GOCC. It's a public enterprise. So it there's a 1993 law that mandates all GOCCs to remit 50% of its net income to the national government, to the treasury, as in a form of corporate dividends. And here, as you can see, this is 2020 data at the height of the pandemic. CAAP was one of the main contributors in terms of corporate dividends to the treasury. So this is what we call the billionaires club. So because the top 15 GOCs, these are basically remitting billions. Is it bad? Not necessarily, because as GOCCs, they have economic reasons or mandate to make profits and to be able to share it by way of corporate dividends to the treasury. But the question, the basic question here is, are all these GOCCs really revenue generating? Should really be revenue generating, or are they, especially CAAP, and then let me add also the PPA, the Philippine Ports Authority, are they service providers in the first place, first and foremost? So it seems that there's a blurring of in terms of clarity of direction, because of these conflicting mandates, which was also discussed in the Q&A as raised by Mr. Villarete. Okay, so we are writing another paper. So this is part of the public enterprise reform agenda that I'm doing with the Respond project. So we have looked at several GOCCs, and here we can see that of course, if you're a private enterprise, your first mandate is to earn money for profit. You can have corporate social responsibility initiatives later on if you have the funds for it. If you're big enough, like I'm not trying to advertise like PALS or San Miguel and the rest, but as you can see, there's a parenthesis in the plus sign here. That means it's optional, but not so in the public enterprise realm. And here, the developmental function, the social dimension is more important than the economic function, or the economic mandate. But I'm not saying that they should not be earning money as an enterprise. They have to make a little money, and they should not lose. So, yeah. But then again, there's no optionality here. So meaning, GOCCs must support the national development goals of the government. That's why the government is there, not really to be in business, but when there's market failure, for example, on one hand, on the other hand, there's a justification for the creation of a GOCC in support of national development goals, then by all means. But at the end of the day, they also have to be on a positive, not on the negative. But then again, we have a unique situation in this country. Why? Because we added another mandate to this economic and social dimensions, which is regulatory, and that basically complicates things. So this unique structure basically breeds these conflicts of interest that we have been talking about for almost a decade now. And in fact, the question of Mr. Villarete earlier was, are we really serious about addressing this? We know this. We've been talking about it for decades now, but nothing has happened. Okay, so in the case of CAAP, so you have these three functions: operator, regulator, and there's also a safety mandate added to it. And but then again, there are efforts to actually decouple. So CAAP will now become just the regulatory body full time, and then a new entity, a new GOCC by the name of Philippine Airport Authority. Sometimes they refer to this as Philippine Airport Development Authority. Will handle the commercial functions, and then the safety aspect in the investigation function will now be given to a new entity that will also be created, which is the National Transport Safety Board, or the Philippine Transport Safety Board. As you can see here, so we have SB, or Senate Bill 1073 for the creation of Philippine Airport Authority, Senate Bill 1121 for the creation of the Philippine Transport Safety Board, and Senate Bill 1646 for CAAP becoming just the regulatory body for the aviation sector. So no, I've not seen yet the bills in the House. Basically addressing these issues. Unlike in the 18th Congress, in the previous Congress, there was House Bill 7976, there was House Bill 9030, and House Bill 87,000. Okay, so right now it's all Senate work. So we still have to work with the lower house to push this advocacy, this reform advocacy. Okay, but let's look at the Philippine Development Plan of 2017-2022. Okay, so it was part of the key legislative agenda to push for this legislation, the enactment of a law that will create independent regulatory bodies. So basically to eliminate these dual roles of being both operator and regulator. And there's also a very specific recommendation in Chapter 9B for the port sector, because as I've said, it's not only CAAP that is suffering from this. Even the Philippine Ports Authority suffers from this conflict. So there's that recommendation now to separate the regulatory and the commercial functions. But then again, if you look at the new Philippine Development Plan 2023-2028, so the language has changed. So to enforce the separation of regulatory and proprietary activities of GOCCs. Now they are looking at these entities not really as GOCCs in terms of corporate structure. But then again, in my sense is that for you to really have lasting and more effective impact in addressing the problem, it has to be a legislative action. So meaning we really have to amend the charters of these GOCCs. I am trying to find out exactly how, let's say, GCG will be able to enforce the separation of regulatory and proprietary activities of these regulatory transport bodies. Okay, so for the policy discussion, and I'm about to finish, so I suggest that we also, given its importance, we also include in the paper the discussion on the creation of the Philippine Transport Safety Board. And then this was a question that was raised by Mr. Yung-Shin Lee, one of the participants. He was asking what happens now, will the government push for the privatization of airports? And partly to answer that question, I think we also have to have a discussion on the potential impact of the recent amendment of the Public Service Act to the aviation sector. So as you well know, the aviation sector has been delisted from the list of what is considered to be public utility. And therefore, the nationality condition of 60-40, which puts a 40% cap on foreign investments on sectors that are considered to be public utilities, are basically no longer applicable in the aviation sector. Okay, and then as a final point, just to complete the picture, in your table 9, where you listed the policy issuances and reforms that happened, maybe we can also include the EO 500 and 500A series of 2006, which started the open skies policy of the government. So it started as a pocket open skies for the Chusdado Macapagal International Airport and the Subic Bay International Airport. Okay, so I think this is all I have. Thank you very much again for giving me this opportunity to react to the paper that was prepared by Dr. Kris and Valerie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Henry, for those thought-provoking responses and insights. We will hear more from him during the open forum. And thank you, sir, also for addressing some of the questions in our Q&A box. Okay, so our conversation this afternoon won't be complete if we will not hear the views of the private sector, particularly our airlines. And we are honored to have with us today the Chief Strategy Officer of Cebu Pacific, Mr. Jose Alejandro Reyes. Mr. Alex Reyes has been with Cebu Pacific Air since 2008. First as the Vice President for Commercial Planning and was responsible for route planning, airline business strategy, and revenue management. In 2012, he led Cebu Pacific in the expansion of its long-haul operations when he was appointed as its general manager. In 2016, he spearheaded the growth of Cebu Pacific's cargo division as its vice president. And in 2019, he was appointed president and CEO of Cebgo. Currently, as Chief Strategy Officer of Cebu Pacific, he is in charge of the airline's corporate strategy, including sustainability initiatives. Mr. Reyes, Sir Alex, you may proceed.
Hey, thank you very much for that kind introduction, Dr. Sheila. Thank you for this invitation to participate in this conference to discuss the PIDS study on our air transport infrastructure. So my congratulations to the authors, Dr. Kris Francisco and Ms. Valerie Lim. This is a very timely study, given that we have just emerged from the debilitating effects of the pandemic. and we're all recrafting, re-optimizing, reprioritizing our national resources now for infrastructure to make sure that they're being put to their best, most effective uses. The first comment I'd like to make is that while the study has rightfully highlighted the important role of that aviation plays in the Philippines, it's my belief that we have actually underestimated the importance of aviation in our economic development. And we continue to underestimate its importance. I'm of the opinion that time and again, we kind of get this wrong, we undercook it. And I'm often left wondering is like, what else can we do to further enlighten civil society as well as policy makers, so that they all gain an even stronger appreciation of the benefits of having a very strong, robust air transport sector. This underestimation of the multiplier effects means that we have chronically also underinvested in the aviation sector. So there's this chronic underinvestment in air transport infrastructure. And when I use the word infrastructure, I use it in the broadest sense of the word. I refer not just to the physical assets such as the runways, the airport terminals, the air traffic radars, and navigation aids, but it's also the practices, the processes, including the technical skills of our personnel who actually run the airports and in our air traffic control system now. In short, there's this chronic underinvestment in both the hardware as well as the software aspects with regards to the air transport infrastructure now. Now, I realize my chronic underinvestment commentary can be said for all of our basic infrastructure, whether that's energy, seaports, roads, or utilities. But underinvesting in aviation and air transport, we think, has a lot more downstream consequences, as what was identified in the study. So you see that air transport is indeed a great enabler of other industries such as tourism. Given our stage of economic development, having a very robust tourism industry is almost like it's a very great match for our economic development. So tourism, we all know tourism absorbs our labor surplus. It leads to better rural incomes, and it actually lifts a lot more people out of poverty. So now, why do I think underinvestment is even more egregious in the aviation sector? It's primarily because our geography ultimately determines what kind of a transportation system we can actually develop and build over time, and what transport machinery are actually economically viable as we make this march towards developed country status in the decades ahead. When it comes to the three modes of transportation, whether that's maritime, road or rail, and air transport, given the archipelagic nature of the Philippines, only two of those can actually span the proverbial A to Z, the Apari to Zamboanga, the tips of Luzon and Mindanao. You can't build enough bridges to actually link all of our islands, and you can't build enough rail networks as well to actually link north and south. Since we are spread out among 7,641 islands, again, there's no continuous interstate road network that can be built. There's no single rail network that can be planned for. Any high-speed rail network or highway can only be an intra-island and not an inter-island system. And you can contrast this with the geography of our ASEAN neighbors, Thailand and Vietnam, because they have contiguous land masses. Their governments can build the thousands of kilometers of roads and lay down thousands of kilometers of train tracks to connect their far-flung cities. Now, in our context, we cannot build that north-south rail network. We can only rely on ships and aircraft to provide this complete end-to-end long-haul transportation links, so that directly link all of our cities and all of our nodes. And by the way, for the maritime sector, the ships can only link the coastal cities and not the mountain cities. In the study that was it was highlighting that in the Philippines, we only have today 90 civil aviation airports spread throughout the country. There are a few more airports being planned for construction in the coming decade, and we'll see a few more capacity upgrades. But I would say that the majority of those 90 existing airports are actually already undersized. Those that have been built and delivered are already exceeding their design capacity. So, and this is quite evident to everyone. So the crown jewel of our airport system, NAIA, is today quite undersized. We're all familiar with the Manila congestion that we see and hear about almost on a daily basis. Our main gateway, that's NAIA, in its peak year of 2019, handled 48 million passengers. It's our view that given the concentration of economic activity here in Metro Manila and the growing population of Filipinos, we're now more than 110 million Filipino souls, globally. So our view is that we should have a capital airport system already with the ability to handle more than 100 million passengers a year. And we need that level of capacity today, not 5 years from now, not 10 years from now. We need it already today as we speak. Why? Because the structure of the Philippine economy is not going to change. All of the economic activity continues to be concentrated here in Metro Manila. So the study did help highlight that there is now this DOTR strategy as well to have multiple airports. We all know that Metro Manila needs additional increases in its capacity, and now the strategy seems to be to have multiple airports to service the future air traffic demand of Metro Manila. Now, whether that new capacity is supplied by Bulacan or Sangli, as well as an upgraded and redeveloped NAIA, there's no question that we need any new additional capacity. We need it today. And it's not just in Metro Manila where this undercapacity in vital infrastructure is felt. When we look at that count, 90 airports, only 1/3 of them actually have sufficiently long runways that they can land jets. Most of those airports, the majority, 60 of them, 60 out of that 90 cannot handle jet aircraft. They have too short runways now. So why is jet aircraft capability important? I'm highlighting this aspect because for modern aviation today, we've all optimized around narrow body jets now. Today, there's two workhorses in the sky, the Airbus A320 family of aircraft and the Boeing 737 family of aircraft. Those two aircraft types, and we call them narrow body aircraft or single aisle aircraft, they're able to deliver the most economical means of air travel today. So today's very more affordable airfares that are available here in the Philippines, these lower airfares would not be possible without these two aircraft coming from the two major aircraft manufacturers now. Again, however, the point is those jets cannot operate to a majority of our airports today. So case in point, Siargao can only handle the smaller turboprop aircraft. The propeller-driven planes actually cost more to operate on a per-seat basis. They don't have the economies of scale and the efficiency that the jet aircraft can provide. Okay. Now, I'll show you what the slide here also from Airbus. Now, so this is their view. They're forecasting what the aircraft demand will look like in the next 2 decades. Now, again, the point here is majority of these new aircraft will be in the so-called narrow body or single aisle jet category, the A320s and the Boeing 737s that I highlighted earlier on. So one idea that I'd really like to leave with this forum, not just the importance of having this more investments in infrastructure, but the takeaway is to develop those airports when we upgrade them so that they should accommodate jets and not just small planes. They should have 2-kilometer long runways and not just 1-kilometer long runways. Under-investment in the runway length is akin to building a highway system that can only handle jeeps and not 50, 60-seater buses or big, large trucks. By not having runways with 2,000-meter long length, that physical constraint limits the kind of aircraft that airlines can operate into them. And it precludes us from operating the most efficient and cost-friendly Airbus or Boeing jets. In the transport parlance, what we say is like the majority of our airports, they are actually undergauged. And actually, over the long run, these design choices, by limiting their runway length, they also limit the capacity that airlines can actually provide to the population centers that they service now. It's worth pointing out also that because we have undergauged those airports, the tourism potential of those islands will also remain constrained. We've all recognized the need to disperse economic activity and economic opportunity away from the capital region, away from Metro Manila. But that goal and that objective can't be delivered if the regional airports are undersized or have short runways now. So you can imagine the tourism potential of Busuanga and Camiguin or Siargao. These are all the top tourist destinations that only have short runways today. Now, if those runways can actually be upgraded to handle jets, then there's the possibility of them having direct flights from either China, Japan, or Korea. And their appeal to foreign tourists would rise if they can. Those foreign tourists can now bypass congested Manila and fly direct to these top tourist destinations. We do have a recent success story to highlight in this regard. That's the Bohol Panglao Airport. Before it was moved to its new location, the Tagbilaran City Airport was only about 1,700 meters long, the runway. Today, the Bohol Panglao International Airport is 2,500 meters long, or 2.5 kilometers. And now, because of that runway length, it can actually land direct flights all the way from Korea, from Seoul. So there's right now, I understand there's 2 direct flights coming in from Incheon straight into Panglao today, which would not have been possible a few years back. So now the other remark that I want to make is, for us, it's good that the study actually highlights that, hey, there's this big push to actually put more of our national resource, to allocate more of the national budget towards infrastructure development, because it's sorely needed. So as the study noted, in the updated Philippine development plan of the Marcos administration, out of the 189 or so flagship projects, 14 are to develop the airports, including the new greenfield airports in Dumaguete as well as Bukidnon. It'll be very, very fantastic to see these projects actually built and operated. They will really help boost our total capacity and our ability to fly in more and more tourists and increase our broad economic potential. What I'd like to point out is that from this public investment perspective, that in parallel to having all of these additional investments into the airport infrastructure, another piece of the massive jigsaw puzzle is the necessary investments in hotels and accommodations and resorts. The graph that I'm flashing right now is just comparing what our installed base is in terms of hotel rooms compared to our neighbors in the region. So you'll note here that in 2021, nationwide, the Philippines had less hotel rooms installed compared to a city like Hong Kong. Okay, so this has to be addressed now. So when you look at also the supply situation at the local level and benchmark against the similar tourist destinations in Southeast Asia, the picture looks like this. In Boracay, there's 8,400 rooms available. Contrast to Phuket, which Boracay, you can say that Boracay actually competes for tourist dollars versus Phuket or even versus Bali, where the level of rooms and accommodations is actually the supply is only 1/10 what is available in those 2 other Southeast Asian destinations. So, and that also translates into a price effect. So it's well known that our hotels on average charge a lot higher compared to these other competing tourist destinations, simply because the supply is still insufficient compared to what it's supposed to answer for, the services that it will provide for the incoming tourism. So now it might sound strange to bring this up during this forum on air transport, but my point is, in parallel to these massive public sector investments in airports, It does need to be matched by investments by the private sector in all of these hotel rooms. Our build initiatives to improve our overall infrastructure must also have, I guess, a parallel effort to encourage more investments in hotels and to address this. Otherwise, we won't be able to unlock the vast tourism potential that the Philippines offers in the region. So we are in kind of a classic chicken and egg conundrum. Which comes first, higher airport capacity and air transport links, or an increase in the hotels and accommodations? But I do say that we can safely conclude that both must be present if we are going to hope to have a very vibrant, dynamic, robust air transport sector. So with that, thank you. I'll hand it back to Sheila.
Thank you very much, Sir Alex. No, very important points you flagged in your comments, especially the fact that we have to look everything holistically, the travel and tourism supply chain, no, such that a weakness in one part of the chain affects the rest. And we can discuss that, unpack that during the open forum. In case you have questions for Sir Alex, then please use the chat, use the Q&A box to for your questions, or if you have also comments regarding his remarks. Okay, so thank you to all our discussants. And at this point, before we go to the open forum, our authors may have something to say in response to the remarks of our discussants. I remember Prof. Basilio giving some recommendations on additional topics for the paper. Dr. Francisco, Kris, you may want to have to give your brief response to our discussants.
Yes. Okay na ba? Sorry.
Yes.
So I'm so sorry for my spotty internet connection earlier. I would like to thank all of the discussants for giving us many points for discussion, because we are actually currently expanding the paper. So all of these things that you've told us will feed into the revised version of the paper. So thank you very much also for giving us new sources of data which we can use. Definitely the topic, Dr. Basilio, the topic about Bulacan Airport will be included in the expanded version. From the news articles that we've gathered, I think the target is to have 100 million capacity for the new Bulacan Airport. In comparison, NAIA has 35 million maximum capacity. And yes, we will thank you also for pointing out the Public Service Act, which I think is very timely and very important point for discussion. Attorney RJ, thank you for shedding light on the functions of CAB and CAAP. We definitely needed someone who is in that government entity to shed some light for outsiders like us. I would also like to thank everyone who sent in their questions. I think a lot has been raised, and we will try to include everything as long as we can in the expanded paper. So maraming salamat po talaga. This is a very useful public seminar, not only for you, for us din. Ang dami naming nakuha today. Thank you.
Okay, Kris? Okay, so let's look at some of the questions in our chat box. Most of them have been answered by our speakers. However, let me read some of some relevant questions, and I hope that our discussants or our speakers can still have the interest and the energy to to verbalize their answers. And this is for the benefit of those who are watching us on Facebook, because they cannot see your answers on the Q&A box. Okay, and this is from Reyes. He said that in the development of travel infrastructure, there is a need for an integrative approach to multimodal transport system. Air, air transport, water transport, even land transport. How can this approach be facilitated among the concerned government agencies and private sector players? Dr. Basilio has already answered this, but perhaps I can also, throw the question to the rest of the speakers, like Sir Alex and Attorney RJ. You may want to start, Prof. Henry.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so in 2013, in reaction to the case that was cited by the author, no? So itago na lang natin sa pangalang Silay Airport.
Okay.
It was supposed to be inaugurated, no? And then afterwards, I think the party that inaugurated it, of course, I'm referring to the president, had to leave the airport and to attend some meetings in the province, but only to experience a rough road. And as a result of that, so there was that convergence program between the Department of Public Works and Highways and the Department of Transportation to have this access to ports and airports program. So right now it's a regular feature, or a regular item in the programs of DPWH to ensure that whenever there's a new airport or port that is being constructed, that they will have to support it with access roads to ensure seamless connectivity.
Okay. Sir Alex, would you like to contribute to the discussion regarding having an integrative approach to multimodal transport system? I know that you're from the air transport sector, but you may have some ideas to share with us.
Yeah, because like when we do fly into new airports, let's say, for instance, we're flying to, for instance, Incheon when we started out. One of the things that we look at is actually the ground transport that's actually available for the passengers that we're carrying into there. So, and that comes back to the viability of the schedule that we're actually going to fly. So if we arrive there at midnight, but there's no trains available, or there's no buses, then we can't operate it. Otherwise, we're gonna strand passengers there until the trains or the systems actually open up at 6 a.m. Right? So again, that's not a sustainable value proposition for our passengers, and we don't want to do it. So I think that the point I'm trying to make is like it's what we've seen effectively at the airport level is the airport operators themselves actually do this kind of very micro coordination. So that they ensure that they have the multimodal transport options available to the passengers that go in and out of their locality and their jurisdiction. So my broad comment is, yeah, this is something that should be, I guess, on the top of the agenda of the airport operators, whether that's a private sector or government entity, to make sure that they tick the box, that they maximize the connections actually possible for the riding public.
Thank you, Sir Alex. Yes, Professor Henry, go ahead po. And then I'll go to Attorney RJ.
I'm sorry, Attorney. Okay. I was just inspired by the answer of Alex, and also in reaction to one of the participants, Reyes, who in the chat box made mention of the Strong Republic Nautical Highway, which is the RORO system. And so talking about intermodal connectivity, so all these modes of transport can actually have a convergence, because for example, a tourist, whether Filipino or meaning domestic tourist or international tourist, can fly to, let's say, Cebu. That's air transport, but from Cebu to Bohol, they can use the RORO to Tagbilaran, and then from Tagbilaran they can move to Hagna, and then take another RORO all the way to Camiguin, and then from Camiguin take another RORO all the way to Cagayan de Oro, and they can fly out from Cagayan de Oro. So without going back and forth from Cebu
That's
to
right.
Bacolod. So then you create what we call tourism loop. So these
That's
are
right.
things that we can push for, we can study, promote. No, it's like saying, come to the Philippines, experience 4 island provinces in just one week or 2. And then they can move around by way of air and Roro shipping.
That's right. So that way, it's really more fun in the Philippines, no? Going back to that campaign. Attorney RJ, please go ahead.
Okay, Ms. Sheila, I think I made mention about this during my discussion a while ago about the connectivity issue, especially so that we are an archipelagic country. So the connectivity issue is very, very important. It's actually a major roadblock in our country. And it's not just about the flights, as I said. It's not about the air connectivity. We have to consider also rail, land, water connectivity, because the lack of efficient, let's say, for example, air and rail integration, this would really be a major factor for, let's say, airlines to consider in respect of their market study. So in my experience, when we were talking to several foreign airlines, their main question is that if we do not use NAIA because it is already congested, how can we make use of other airports vis-a-vis how can it be connected to the main city like Clark and Manila, Cebu and Manila? So we have to present a good solution for them to see that connectivity is not a major issue in an archipelagic country such as ours.
That's right. Yeah, good point. Thank you very much, Attorney RJ. I have a question for Sir Alex, because as a Chief Strategy Officer, it's part of your TOR to introduce and implement sustainability initiatives. What do you mean by sustainability initiatives? And in the case of Cebu Pacific, what are those initiatives, and how do you think can those initiatives improve your services and perhaps for the aviation industry, what do you think can be adopted also by other airlines to help the aviation industry improve?
Yeah. So because when you say sustainability, it's supposed to encompass all of the different categories, the ESG stuff, no? So not just environment, but also social, and governance, right? Aspects of it. So when it comes to social, our main mission, which is to provide affordable transport to as many people as many airports as possible. I mean, that's core to our business. So I think we're okay naman when it comes to the SNA. Now, where we need to do a lot of work on is really on the environmental initiatives. No? So we do rely on the jet engine, which puts out 3.16 kilograms of carbon for every kilogram of jet fuel that we burn. Results in 3.16 kilograms of carbon emissions into the atmosphere now. So what we need to, and what we're trying to go towards is the net zero world now. So we've committed in the airline industry is committed by 2050 we will fly net zero. That means that whatever emissions we're still emitting into the atmosphere are offset by a corresponding reduction in so we take it out by another means from the atmosphere now. So our main goal right now is to decarbonize or use lower carbon fuel. No? So there's this fuel called SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel, which it's not a zero carbon fuel, it's a low carbon fuel. So if you use SAF, then you can actually reduce carbon emissions by up to 80%. Okay? And the SAF is coming from feedstock that it's nature-based or biological-based. It's not coming from the bones of dead dinosaurs. No? So that's the intent. But where we are today in aviation is there's just not enough SAF being produced today. And whatever is available out there is priced at 3 to 4 times what jet fuel, the polluting jet fuel is. So again, if we buy completely 100% SAF, we will also be an unsustainable business, because then we have to charge airfares that are 4 or 5 times what the level is now. So right now it's an uneconomical proposition. But what we're trying to do is lay the groundwork so that the aviation industry makes that transition to a much more sustainable future, which is lower carbon emissions. Because we all accept that we can't continue to put carbon into the atmosphere. That's going to result in a catastrophic rise in global temperatures now. So that's.
Thank you, Sir Alex.
Short.
I saw Dr. Basilio smiling. Is there something that you would like to say, Dr. Basilio, regarding this topic? Okay, no problem, sir. Yes, we have a question here. This has been answered already by Dr. Francisco, but you may want to contribute to the discussion. This is for our discussants, but Dr. Kris, you may want to reiterate or reiterate your answer, no? So what do you think from Yong-Sin Lee? What do you think about the idea of privatizing some airports? And you have your answer here, Dr. Kris. The idea of privatizing or privatization of our airports. Okay, I think we lost Dr. Francisco, but Attorney RJ, would you like to take a crack at this question, and then I'll go to Prof. Henry?
Okay, but I would have to rely on my personal opinion on the matter so as not to give any premature, any premature action on the part of the department, because I know that it is in the media that Secretary Bautista was in fact eyeing on studying actually the privatization of our airports. And I agree with Dr. Francisco that it may actually be the best solution, considering that the congestion of NAIA presents really an alarming threat to the growth needs of the aviation sector. And in order for us to focus more on the needs of the traveler, we're not only talking about safety here, but also convenience. Okay, so that this may be better addressed by a much more focused solution that is by privatizing the same. So again, Dr. Francisco, like we said, the government must ensure that the welfare must also be protected.
That's
so
right.
As I was saying, when we talk about the service of common carriers such as airlines, we're not looking only after their safety. Okay, not only to transport them safely, but to transport them conveniently, efficiently. Okay, so the use of better airports that can serve this functions well through the private sector may be a good business solution.
Thank you, Attorney RJ. Prof. Henry.
Okay, thank you, Sheila. No? So I think we can also merge this question of Mr. Yong-Sin Lee with the question of Justin at the delay, because they talk about station. So we can hit 2 birds with 1 stone. But I think we also have to clarify that there are 2 things to this question. One is private sector involvement in infrastructure development, like airports. Okay, so through PPP, for example, and in the chat box, Mr. Navarrete also made mention that may be a good way forward, considering that the constraint, as he raised in the chat box of the CAAP, for example, remitting, because it's a GOCC, which I already explained.
Yes, you did already. Yes.
Come to the government, so and therefore constraining its resources, to be able to fund more airport infrastructure development, for example. So tendering more airport projects in the market where
Mhm.
private sector can participate is a good way to actually fast track infrastructure development. And we are not only harnessing private sector resources, but more importantly, private sector expertise. No?
Expertise. That's
And that's
right.
why I mentioned that the discussion on the Public Service Act is comes in handy in this discussion, because it now makes it more interesting, because we are not just talking about a possibility of local investments or investors, but also foreign direct investments into these types of infrastructure development. But the other part is the privatization of the operation, the commercial operation of existing airports. No? So, and I also agree that that could be a way to improve the quality of services that we can provide our commuting public.
Commuting public, yeah. Yeah. Speaking of hard to reach areas, no? What has happened to missionary routes? Meron pa ba yun? And anong nangyari sa mga missionary routes?
I'll take the first crack.
Yes, sir. And then I'll go to the rest of the speakers.
From the economic standpoint, no.
Opo.
Ako personally, I don't believe in missionary routes, no. So I still believe that competition is the best. And, that was what was used, no, when more players in the aviation sector wanted to come in. No, had Congress, the legislators listened to this kind of an argument, and the new entrants could not have entered, and we would still be that same.
That's right.
So on the other hand, the question is who are now flying those so-called missionary routes, and I wouldn't want to patronize our guest here, but they are there. No? So I'm doing a lot of work now in BARM. No? So
okay.
How do you get to Tawi-Tawi? Of course. How do you get to from Tawi-Tawi to Cotabato? So there's also so yeah, I think the motivator, the real motivator, the real incentive is the market. So
it's the market.
Operators, airline operators will enter it because there's money to be made. No? So hindi naman sila mukhang pera, but that's business. No? So if there's a profit incentive, I'm sure they will provide. So, and that's what happened in Roro. No? I'm more familiar with the Roro shipping. No? So because in RA 9295, which is the domestic shipping, so there's also a provision there, no, that provides protection to players in quote-unquote missionary routes, no? And if that is the case, then the Rojas Mindoro to Katiklan Roro route would have been classified easily as a missionary route, because the route was only established in 2003, and there was no certain. No, but then again, because of the tourism boom, of course, Boracay,
right.
There are a lot of Roro operators flying the route. Had we really constrained by invoking that missionary route, that market would not have developed as it is.
You're right, sir. And there's a saying that build it and they will come. So you, diba?
Yeah, in economics we say says law, diba? Supply creates its own demand. So I think that law, that economic law, is very applicable in the case of infrastructure.
Infrastructure,
it will catalyze more economic activities.
That's right. Thank you, Sir Alex.
Yeah, let me take a stab at this. So yes, there are still missionary routes, and when I say missionary routes, it's the ones that lose us money, right? But they don't last very long in our network because they are clearly unsustainable propositions. So We are actively looking at all the time what are the new routes we can actually launch, and we know when we start a route, there's insufficient traffic in many of these smaller cities now. But what we hope to see is over time the traffic actually builds up. Then it gets to the sustainable stage wherein it's more than covering its costs, right? It's not losing us money, but. So I would say there are missionary routes, but they don't last very long, right? Unless they get to that fully sustainable stage that we should deploy sort of the assets and the resources onto different routes. We're not in the business of wasting the money of our shareholders, no. So that's it. But we are quite happy to actually do the experiments and launch into new destinations where there's completely unproven demand. So how many people actually want to fly into say Antique, for instance? We don't know. There's no historical record, or maybe the last flights that were there were from the 1980s or 1990s. So you can't base any decisions on whether to launch that route or not based on outmoded data. The travel patterns are different. The population that you're going to draw your revenue from is on a different scale. No? So we are in the business of actually launching these new routes, and then for the most part, more often than not, in the first few months they are missionary routes because they're losing money. But always our hopes that we get it to the sustainable stage wherein the costs are more than covered by the revenue that comes in.
Thank you, Sir Alex. Attorney Rhea, would you have anything to say about this
and
question?
apart from what these gentlemen said, apart from the fact that there are carriers who are venturing into these missionary routes, we have to take also into consideration that there are smaller carriers that are willing to go to areas, especially for serving some travelers and also charterers. Okay, so apart from that, there is higher demand now for underserved areas. And if we are lucky, the tourism sector would be able to address these issues. And a while ago, I think it was Ms. Lim or Dr. Francisco who mentioned that there is a drive or a suggestion to develop these areas in order to attract more investors. And of course, more investors equals more tourists, diba? Chicken and egg situation. No investors, no tourists. More investors, more tourists, vice versa. So if we get to be focused on this drive to develop the tourism sector, in particular in these areas, maybe the airlines, whether they are the bigger airlines or smaller carriers, would be able to serve these areas already.
Thank you very much, Attorney RJ. There is a question here from Cherise Duarte, still unanswered, and let me read it. The Department of Transportation plans to release the TOR for NAIA rehabilitation project on modernization and capacity expansion before June. How can the department ensure that their TOR can accurately fix problems with the airport? And what can the private sector do to support this game plan? Who would like to take a crack at this question? Who would like to answer this first? Dr. Francisco is having internet connectivity problems. So Dr. Kris, you may want to type your answer and then I can read it. And Valerie, perhaps I can ask Valerie this question too. And then I can go to the rest of the speakers. Val, are you there?
Hello po.
Yes, Val. Did you see the question?
Sorry?
Yes, there's a question here from Cherise Duarte about the TOR for the NAIA rehabilitation project. So that this lady is asking for for your views on how can the Department of Transportation ensure that the project will really fix the problems with the airport, and what do you think can the private sector do to support it?
I'm sorry, I haven't seen this DOR.
Okay, it's fine, it's fine. Okay, let me give you time to reflect on this question, and perhaps I can go first to, since we're talking here about the private sector, perhaps I can
Yeah.
ask Sir Alex. Please, sir.
Yeah, so with regards to Manila, no, this isn't the first time that the Philippine government, as well as the private sector, are actually putting forth proposals on how to redevelop NAIA, no, in the best possible way. So our assumption also going into this is that the terms of reference that the government is releasing this time around, it's building on all of the other learnings and all of the other studies that have been done cumulatively. You know? And don't forget that there's been already several submissions from unsolicited proposals as well, no? In the past several years on what needs to be done in the Philippines. And I think they more or less are aligned in terms of what they're recommending. Definitely, we need additional terminals. We need a people mover that's good for within the, so it's very easy to go from one terminal to the other. So on and so forth. There's a whole raft of recommendations, and they're broadly in alignment. So I think that the work that the government is doing today, together with the Asian Development Bank, because they've been appointed as one of the advisors, is to make sure that all of this stuff is actually put together in a coherent package and use all of the learnings with regards to this now that's been built up over the years, because we've studied this. The industry as well as the government have studied this immensely, and there's a wealth of information and studies out there and analyses that have been done, which will, if done properly in the NAIA context, should result in a dramatic increase in the total capacity of the entire airfield.
Thank you very much, Sir Alex. And would the rest of the speakers have anything to say? Okay. We now go to our last question. I think we have covered a lot of ground already, and most of the questions have been answered also by our speakers. But this one actually has been covered in the presentation. But you may want to know. You may want to explain this again on why is it important to separate the regulation and operation functions in our airports. And Justine Irish Tabili wants to know how can privatization help, if it can help in making our airports more efficient. Okay. Well, there's check and balance. That's the short answer to that. But Dr. Basilio, would you like to explain the importance of separating the regulatory and management and operations function?
Okay, thank you, Sheila. There are two things here. Now, one is a conflict of interest, right?
That's right.
Because regulation and the commercial mandate are by nature at odds with each other. So there's natural conflict, right? And then, as I've said, what's wrong with us is that we have this unique structure wherein your GOCC, you made it into a regulatory body, right? So complicating the situation. So therefore, the moral hazard here is that there's that possibility of the regulatory body to use its regulatory power to protect its commercial interest against competition, for example, coming from the private sector, right? Which is contrary to public the promotion of public.
That's right.
Right? And then the second thing has to do with the principle of competitive neutrality, right? So when the government goes into business, it should not have any undue advantage over its private sector competitors, right? or the market players that are there. But being the regulator, as I've said, it can exercise and an abuse of its power to thwart competition simply to protect its commercial function. And that's why it is so important for us to separate these two and cuentas claras. So
Cuentas claras, yes.
So you're a regulator, then you just regulate. Then let somebody, another agency that is independent and detached from that regulator to do the business part, and without any undue advantages over its private sector competitors. Okay. I hope
Thank you
that's,
very much, Prof. Henry. Okay, I'm afraid we have to close the open forum. So to cap our discussion, may I ask our speakers from some brief parting words, if you have any. I will call Dr. Kris Francisco last, as she's still trying to fix her internet connection. Let's see if she can still come back. But at this point, may we hear from Attorney Gonzalez and then Dr. Basilio and Mr. Alex Reyes. Please, Attorney Gonzalez.
Okay, thank you once again for having us in order to have developments in the future about our airport infrastructure. I hope that one day we can truly have that integrated and efficient air transport system. And of course, this cannot be done alone by the government. It has to be in partnership, in close partnership with the private and public sectors. And of course, we are hoping that the public, can likewise help us in improving. Like what PIDS does is truly helpful, considering that you are developing evidence-based policy, or helping create evidence-based policies, and that I hope that one day that we can have an efficient airport infra and no congestion anymore to talk about.
Thank you very much, Attorney RJ. Well, we are organizing these seminars to serve as, venues for evidence-based discussion of issues, and we hope that this platform has been helpful to everyone. Okay, sir, Professor Henry, please, if you have any parting words.
Yeah, just
to our
two
audience.
things. Now, one, policy, right? So we have to push this policy reform, to put order to our regulatory environment, to improve regulatory governance and quality by decoupling these conflicting mandates of our
regulators. Right.
So that's one. And then on the other hand, harness the expertise and resources of the private sector in fast-tracking infrastructure development, which we at this point lack. Those two.
Thank you very much for those two clear points, Prof. Henry. Okay, and of course, Sir Alex Reyes of Cebu Pacific. Sir, you may have some parting words to our audience.
Yeah, again, good that we have this study now in place, and it highlights a lot of the challenges and dilemmas that we have, and it's quickly identified that. So, but of course, I'd like us to move as a society, move quickly to the decision making, actually execution. So let's put the shovel into the soil to build all of these airports as quick as we can, because Philippine economy badly needs all of this infrastructure investments. They should have been built and operated a long time ago. So hope we can not just catch up, but really, as RJ said, deliver on this fantastic vision of having a really wonderful air transport network that we can all be proud of.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir Alex. And let me read the parting words or the parting message of Dr. Kris Francisco. She said, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today for a very fruitful discussion on the country's air transport sector. Our hope is that our work could contribute in achieving a better air transport sector, not only for international users, but for all of us in the country. Okay, so thank you very much to all our guests. Friends, please join me in thanking them through a big virtual clap. Okay, and we also appreciate your active participation in the poll and the open forum. We hope you enjoyed our discussion and learned a lot as well. And here are the winners of our webinar raffle. For those who are joining us for the first time today, well, every webinar we pick 3 names randomly from our Zoom and Facebook participants, and we give them something as a token of our appreciation. So our raffle winners for today are Nigel Paul Villarete, Emmanuel Caiña, and Jam Bermudez. Okay, our webinar team will contact you for the delivery of your prize. And finally, we have some reminders. You can access all the presentations from today's webinar on the PIDS website, and flash on the screen is the link to the full study of Dr. Francisco and Valerie Lim. And we will also, you can also, please also answer the feedback survey that will pop on your screen after this webinar. Your comments are important to us to improve our virtual events. In addition, please regularly visit our website and follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. We also have a YouTube channel where you can access all the recordings of our events. And for our succeeding webinars this month, we have, for next week, we will discuss about structural reforms in telecommunications, building the foundations of the digital economy. So that's on the 20th of April. Then on the 27th, we will have our webinar on boosting Philippine services, trade, and tourism under the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Okay, and finally, we would like to acknowledge the various organizations from the government, academia, civil society, business, and international development community that join us today. This concludes our virtual policy forum. Again, our sincerest thanks to all our guests and to all our participants on Zoom and Facebook for your active participation. We hope that you'll join us again next week. Maraming salamat po.